Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by the Blue Alliance. Keep up to date on all live and archived FIRST Robotics events and team stats at thebluealliance.com. First Updates Now is brought to you by Twitch. Fun is now a Twitch partner and offering some awesome subscriber-only benefits. Subscribe today or get a free subscription each month when you have Amazon Prime by linking your account and clicking subscribe.
Shut up and sit down.
Tonight on Candidly Speaking, we're going to dive deep on ethics of business in FIRST, and then roundtable discussions on the team cost accounting worksheet, the withholding allowance, and bag and tag. This is Candidly Speaking for FIRST Updates Now. I'm Libby, Kamen, Drost.
And I'm Karthik, Kanagasabapathy. Joining us tonight, we have two awesome guests. First off, we actually couldn't keep them stopping to talk during the pre-show, so the post-show and everything else is going to be great. Marshall Massengill here from Team 900, old friend of Libby and mine. And so welcome, Marshall.
Thank you for having me.
And a first-time guest on the show. We're really excited to have his insights, especially when it comes into what you can do with the withholding allowance. Justin Foss from Team 558, Elm City Robo Squad. Welcome,
Thanks
Justin.
for having me.
Yeah,
nice
glad
to be here.
You can be here. So we do have a giveaway for tonight's show. It's a no, it's not a Robo-Rio. We're not that cool, but it is a 1676 Pascack Pioneers t-shirt. That's right, Libby, you could have this shirt, I know it's everything you've always wanted. One lucky winner is going to get this 2017 St. Louis Championship Alliance shirt. All you have to do to win is follow or subscribe to our Twitch channel, and be in the chat and ready to spam the keyword when it's released near the end of the show. If you're a subscriber, you have 5 times as good of a chance to win, so that seems like a no-brainer. And you can subscribe for free through Twitch Prime or just for a few dollars a month. If you have any questions that you'd like to be read during the show, and I'm sure there's going to be a few, just toss them into the chat, tag First Updates Now, and our producer Nik will make sure that we get to them, maybe.
Well, we'll do our best. So our first story tonight relates to a post on Chief Delphi earlier this week about ethics among suppliers and, in reality, anybody who has a business model that involves FIRST. Before we get into the discussion, we at FUN would like to disclose that FUN is currently in active discussions with suppliers and sponsors of FIRST in regards to financial support for the 2018 season. Furthermore, many of us at FUN, everybody on this show at this point, are personal friends and also have the utmost respect for those who work at these companies and for obviously the companies themselves. With that said, we feel that it is important to openly discuss the topic, and we're going to approach the essence of the conversation. Are there any ethical boundaries broken when it comes to one entity bringing to market a product that is essentially identical to other entities? Also, how do the core values, the first core values of gracious professionalism and even cooperation translate into the free market? Let's take a few minutes each to address this, and Karthik, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Libby. So full disclosure, many of you may know that I did used to work for VEX for 10 years. I currently do not. And the original poster of that thread on Chief Delphi, Aaron Hill, is someone who I can, is a former colleague of mine and a friend of mine. So I'm just going to lay that all out there because, one of the first things I want to say is I think that a lot of people in these discussions do not disclose what their background is. And I think a lot of the times people aren't reading between the lines and seeing that people have their own intents and whatever. So I guess the first point I want to make, and it actually relates to a tweet I saw the other day. It's a picture of this bench in a park. And, it says, in memory of Roger Bucklesby. And then on the bench it says, who hated this park and everyone in it. And I think that when I pass away, I really hope someone puts that on Chief Delphi for me, because that's really how I feel about that website on certain days, and especially when I read through threads like this ethics thread. So I just have to say, I think the thread was, all for Aaron to, state his opinion and say what's on his mind. That's, what the internet's for, and that's fine. But I think the speculation that followed was just incredibly uninformed. With any sort of situation like this, there are multiple sides to the story. And no one really knows the full truth unless you're directly involved. I'd say probably maybe 10% of the posters in there knew one side of the story, let alone 3. So it was just crazy how intensely passionate people were getting about something they just knew nothing about. And I don't know why that surprises me because, I spend a lot of time on NBA Twitter and there's just that constantly. So yeah, that was just it was just like crazy to see how many people were just getting so passionate. And so it really ties back to a few weeks ago, Frank had a blog post about the backfire effect, which really talks about, how sometimes when people are presented with a dissenting opinion, it just makes them further entrenched in their own opinion. I think we were seeing a lot of that on Chief, is that people had preconceived notions of what they deemed to be the ethics of these various suppliers, and people were just piling in on their own feelings. So it was just people talking above each other. I think it's interesting that Vex hasn't put a statement in this thread, and I think it's intentional. If Vex wanted us to know how they felt, they would, and if they were upset, they'd pretty much make it known. They've been pretty good about that over the years. So, I mean, there's, Aaron's a former Vex employee, he had his thing to say, but he definitely doesn't speak for Vex. I'm also wary of corporate statements to the community over these types of things. I've seen plenty of them over the years, and this isn't like, I'm just going to try and frame the rest of my discussion as nothing specific to the companies involved here, but just in general, and this goes for team announcements or whatever. A lot of times when you get this like blowy, flowy statement of, oh, this is what it's like, there's just so much BS. I've seen so many statements over the years that just don't mean anything that I'm very, less than trustworthy about stuff I hear. As for the specific issue of a supplier knocking off at others, I mean, this is a common business practice in the world. And I think this is a part of where the discussion was going and where people were kind of talking over each other, where some people see ethics as something is ethical is if it is legal. Did I break any rules or laws? No, then it's legal, then it's ethical. While others see that there can be a higher code beyond what's legal, and that's what their ethics is. And I think that was kind of missed. And that's going to be like my fourth point, because I think that's a more important discussion about FIRST. But knockoffs happen, it's common, and it sucks. It sucks for the perspective of the person like Aaron, who spent all this time working on this motor, and then he sees his work has been copied. I think a lot we see this in FRC. We especially see it in FTC and VRC when robots get copied. And like for the most part, we understand that's totally legal, and yeah, it's part of the game, and it's part of the evolution of the game, and there's good things that happen when robots get copied because they evolve and such. But for the person who designed that first robot, like to see her robot copied by someone else, like that sometimes hurts. And so I understand why Aaron feels weird. On the other hand, from the consumer perspective, man, having more products designed around a standard motor is a good thing. Think about if we had two versions. Well, I guess we do have two versions of the big sim. We have the big sim and the mini sim. But say we had two sim-like motors that were very different, where so like say you bought like a gearbox from Andy Mark one year, and then you couldn't swap other motors into it. Like it would just be such a huge hassle. So having this, like these design standards and a standardized motor like the 775 Pro, that's a good thing for the community in general. This interchangeability is a big thing. So Andy Mark, like that's helpful. Personally, I don't really have an issue with what they did, but I totally get why Aaron would be passionate. But I guess what I really want to talk about here is, and I think that's what I kind of want to talk about with the show, is how FIRST ethics can apply to the business world. And I got really disappointed to see a lot of people in that thread just simply dismiss them as incompatible with the business world. If we really think that gracious professionalism and cooperation just can't work in the real world, what are we doing in this program? And I'm speaking as mentors. Like, what are we doing as adults in this program if we don't believe in these values? Like, are we just here to build robots against high school kids? Because that's kind of weird. And I don't know, like I've spent a lot of time talking with Dr. Flowers and John Abley about this, and they're really passionate that FIRST is a vehicle to try and show us that, hey, these values that work in FIRST that we believe in, and like, we see cooperation all the time in FRC, they can actually work to the real world, and our goal is to try and make that real world a better place. I had a really, really unique opportunity about 10 years ago. FIRST Robotics, so John Abley, for those of you who don't know, he's the former chairman of the board for FIRST. And he has a business conferencing center just north of Toronto, where it's like a resort, except businesses come in there and they have meetings there, they have conferences, and like there's some special programs they can do that have been created through John's guidance. And John's one of the richest men in the world, like a multi-billionaire, but he's really passionate about this stuff. So he invited FIRST Robotics Canada, as well as some members of Team 1114, to design a game using Vex robots that would teach business executives about cooperation. And so basically, this game was, like you'd have like 20 teams. they'd take a pre-built robot and they'd play, but the scoring system was designed, even though it was a 1-versus-1 game, the scoring system was designed that you got more points if you worked with your opponent. But nowhere in the rules did it tell you to do this. You had to have that epiphany, that aha moment. And it was such a cool day. We spent with like 100 executives from this major Canadian company. And like they learned about robots, they learned about FIRST, but they played this game and they got super, super passionate about it. But then once they realized that they needed to work with their opponents, the whole feel of the building changed. It went from these guys and women being super competitive and territorial to all of a sudden, like the things that we take for granted in FIRST just started happening. Like people were helping other teams with their robots, and they were trading things with them. And it was just like, oh my goodness, like this is a microcosm of FIRST. It's actually working. And so I don't know. And some people have said that my weakness in the business world is that I believe a little bit too much in gracious professionalism. And that always hurts me when I hear that, because it's like, man, maybe I am going on the wrong path. But I think it's foolish to just assume that we can't take these values that we've learned in FIRST and then take them into the real world. I saw a few comments in there saying, oh, well, if companies cooperate in the business world, it's what we call collusion. And it's like, man, have you taken a microeconomics course? That's not what the definition of collusion is. And like I saw like terrible definitions of duopolies and stuff. And I'm like, so for all the kids in high school right now, I say actually make sure you take a microeconomics course in university, even no matter what your major is. It's like so important and useful. And but you've got to see these things. But when you have a market, it is true that if two companies cooperate, it is not necessarily might not be the best thing for the consumer, because they could cooperate and then agree to price fixing and terrible things like that to keep prices up. And that's not a system that benefits the consumer. But there are plenty of systems of cooperation between companies that do benefit the consumer. For example, when companies are working for towards like, hey, like, hydrogen-powered fuel cells or efficient technologies. Like this is something where the consumers need to see the benefits. So it works that way when they work together. And so in the FIRST market, if we have a couple of suppliers, like look at the speed controllers. The partnership between VEX and CTRE brought us the CAN talent. Like that was a huge sort of thing for the community. So sometimes and I get that also competition is important, and like the competition in this market, when VEX Pro showed up, Andy Mark dropped their prices by like $100 on gearboxes. That was good for the community too. But it's possible for these companies to cooperate. And like Frank's had examples in his blog where like there's been times where VEX and Andy Mark have worked together to make sure things made it into the kit of parts. So to say that companies can't work together at all is like totally crazy to me. And I don't know, like there's something to be said where sometimes when a company gets knocked off, it forces them to innovate. On the flip side, when a company gets knocked off, sometimes there's an opportunity cost to being knocked off. And then sometimes they just say, hey, I don't want to be involved in this market anymore. And there was a couple of smaller FRC suppliers who posted that. It's like, hey, if our product got knocked off, we would just leave the market. And so I don't know. That's just a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. And that was just kind of like my mishmash, my brain dump of what I thought about that thread, but didn't think was worth posting in there. But I think the most important thing is that the values we learn in FIRST, if we really think that they're only applicable to FIRST, then I don't know why we're in the program and I don't know what we're doing. But I truly believe that these values are important to teach our students. And the most important things that I've learned in FRC, aside from the learning how to win, is learning how to respect my opponents. And that's taken me and made me a better person. So I know that sounds like a lot of like horse crap, but it's really how I see things. So that's just, I think to say that cooperation isn't a real world value, I just, that bothered me that so many people were just kind of expressing it like that. So I just said a whole bunch, and that was kind of like, diarrhea of the mouth. So Justin, feel free to follow up my diarrhea with some toilet paper.
I mean, for me, it's really just, I want to just see more products, and I'm not interested in too much getting involved in the ethics of all of this. I hope that with VEX's release coming next week, they release some excellent products, and that kind of calms us down and we have something new to talk about instead of 775 Pro drives and freaking out about this motor being a ripoff. If it is a ripoff or not, we're not even sure, 100% sure yet. We'll see when the dyno testing comes back, I guess. But I'm ready for a new season. I want to move on. I don't like this drama, like this next level drama that's happening. But I understand Aaron, and I hope everything comes through in the end. And I think Marshall has some interesting things to talk about the motor controllers.
Yeah, I think that thread has just been a disaster. I've stayed out of it for the most part. I think maybe I've made some kind of crappy post with some humor to it, but the thing I'd rather kind of talk about is the DMC motor controller versus the Talons, and I feel like nobody's really mentioned that. We keep talking about motors, and I feel like, at least with the motors, there seems to be, we've gotten some input from, I don't know, I guess from the companies that are manufacturing it to a degree. We certainly got Aaron's kind of take on it, though really Aaron, I think, was posting some frustration because he'd spent so much time developing with the 775 Pro. And then on top of that, we got kind of Andy Baker's take on it, which was nice. And I don't know, I appreciate Andy taking the time to at least give some information to the community when all of us, I think, were kind of looking for it and wanting information about, you know, what happened. But I feel like the bigger issue that has been ignored has been the motor controller story. And I'll point to the DMC motor controller, which I don't know that there were that many teams that used it. In fact, FIRST, I think, released the information for what motor controllers teams were using last year. But I didn't look at it, I'll be honest, to tell you how many teams were using these. I am kind of...
Hey, Marshall, I'll jump in there. So there was no data on the DMC specifically, but that's probably because if you it was all based on like your robot code and what you initialized, and you could easily initialize, as because the point you're going to make in a second, you could easily initialize a DMC to a Talon/Victor because they're so similar. Go on.
I agree completely. In fact, they are very similar. And if you go poke around the Digilant website for the DMC, and they're currently on sale for a total of $50. That is not a product placement for them. I bought one for scientific purposes that I'm going to take some pictures of and post when it finally comes in, because I feel like the community at large hasn't seen these things in the wild and doesn't understand what they are. And maybe that'll be my contribution to this discussion when that happens. But anyway, the motor controllers, if you go poke around the documentation for them, you'll eventually find the GitHub website where you can not only find the schematics for the motor controller, the DMC60, which are very interesting because there are some things that appear on the schematics that don't appear on the physical product. In particular, some inputs for CAN, as well as a 10-pin connector that looks oddly familiar to me, the pinout. And not only that, the source code that's out on GitHub for the DMC60 does in fact reference CAN control that it doesn't seem to support, but I'm not really sure. Part of why I bought it is because I kind of want to see if it actually supports it or not. I want to know if that firmware actually ended up on the device that they're shipping. Because I'm a curious sort, and it seemed like an interesting scientific experiment, if nothing else. For me, we use Talons on the team, and I love them dearly. So they're by far my go-to motor controller, and the thing that we're doing a lot of work with right now. 900's kind of embarked upon the quest to put ROS on the robot, so we're knee-deep down that road, to mix some metaphors there. Anyway, I feel like the community at large, we've been talking about motors when the real story, I think, when you start talking about this stuff is with the motor controllers, and in particular, the fact that motor controller was made legal last year, despite the fact that what it looks like is something that was obviously taken from someone else. So very blatantly so, and that worries me. I don't know what the appropriate response should be for that. I don't know. It's an interesting discussion, and I feel like that's the bigger picture story, and it's kind of been glossed over because we want to argue about 775 Pros or Red Wines or whatever they're called. So,
well, I think it's more been glossed over just because so few people knew about that product. There wasn't much marketing behind it, and so like other than it being a line in the manual, I don't know that many people knew that it existed because it just kind of is there.
Along with that, I will mention I don't know if I should mention that or not. There's a product that we're currently.
Marshall, you can mention anything you want.
I'm sure I can. I'm trying to be nice to those involved, I guess. There's a product we're beta testing right now, is what I will say, that some mentors and I believe alumni from another team have developed. I hope it sees the light of day before build season. I really, really do. I think the team has done a phenomenal job in developing their product and integrating all the different things they've done with it. But I have this feeling that if the software is not locked down prior to it being released, we are going to see other people blatantly copy it. So that's my take on it. So anyway, I'm curious. As I think a lot of this, and in fact, my kind of bigger picture to all of it, FRC is growing up. And in fact, I did a talk recently with Andrew Schreiber that we've posted online. And I will point to our website for it. Andrew's going to murder me. So there's a website called andymarkup.com because I registered that. Not because I have anything against Andy Mark, but because it was available and quite frankly, it amused me. So anyway, Andrew and I have done a talk about 50 years.
I'm sure Marshall was a poophead.com was available too.
It probably was, but it didn't occur to me to register that one. So maybe I ought to go do that.
I think
now.
the inspectors have already registered that one.
Probably. I'm willing to bet Al owns that one, actually. He's domain squatting it. But what I will say is that Andrew and I did a talk about the 50 years of FRC. It's recently been posted. It's out there and available. You guys can go watch it. We'd love feedback for it. Yeah, that's us. So we're amusing ourselves with the logo. So we Donald Trump gold-plated the Andy Mark logo, obviously. So anyway, what I will say is that FRC is growing up, and we've got some growing pains that we're all going through. And I think as a community, we're not really understanding what's likely to happen. We're seeing it already with the suppliers, with parts being constrained, with the parts not just being copied, but software being copied. And we're slowly moving into the realm where we're less hardware constrained and more software constrained, which I work in the world of software. It's common to see things stolen and copied, much more so than in the world of physical things. It's an interesting discussion, and it leads to, I don't know, it's this community growing up. Whether we want to realize it or not, that's what this comes down to. We're getting older, and we're going along in how we do things. So yeah. Andrew and I kind of took our take on it. It's amusing. I'm really hoping we get to give the same talk at championships this year. We'll see. He's going to, again, murder me for mentioning any of this. So it's highly entertaining. It's really just me and Andrew Schreiber goofing off for an hour. So, but anyway, yeah, where were we going with all of this?
I think where we were going, we're going to let Libby talk about what she thinks about all this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was thankfully a little bit glad that I got to go last on this one. I was kind of happy because I knew that the really, really important stuff of this discussion would already be covered by the time it got to me, and I wouldn't have to kind of be the face of some of that, which was helpful. Sorry, my laptop is about to die. We didn't think about that before the show. But I think the biggest thing is exactly what you mentioned, Karthik, is that it is entirely possible and, and important for businesses, even though they're serving, first teams, and I've got it to be a business, you hopefully are going to make money and try to sustain yourself. But it's important that even though these companies are making business-oriented decisions, they're not doing something that, falls against the ethics that we're teaching the communities they serve. And I'm not saying that anyone has done that. Again, we've covered that we don't know both sides of the story. We don't know the information all around, and no one's ever really going to know both sides. It's impossible to have been a fly in the wall in both rooms in this sort of sense. But as long as the companies that are serving these first communities are following the same kind of core values that we're asking the kids that are participating to follow, I mean, that makes, like, kind of summed up perfectly, that makes the world a better place, and that's what we're supposed to be doing here. Every team is going to have their, preferred vendor doesn't mean that we all have to like equally spend between every company. But the posts about like, I'm never working with this again, I'm never going to use this, this is disgusting, this is just all this craziness was very unfirst community, the ideal of the first community, it was peak Chief Delphi, but it is not what our community should be. And I think that's really where the ethics discussions should be, are the companies that are serving these FRC communities behaving in a way that we expect the kids on FRC teams to behave. And that's kind of my piece on it. And you guys covered it way better than I possibly could have. So yeah, I don't have too much to add.
Thanks, Libby. I guess I'll just finish it up with a quote from John Abley, who said, there's two types of ways to compete in this world. You can drag your opponent down, or you can rise above your opponent. And I'm not applying that to the two suppliers, because honestly, Andy Mark and Vex are great. They work together all the time. They're friends. They play together. It's like they're good. But I just think that all of us, when we leave for FRC as high school students, and we go into university and we go into the business world, if we're not taking our first values with us, I think we're making a big mistake. And I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we're doing the world a disservice. And I'm passionate about this. I gave a TED talk on ethical competition, so yeah, I believe that in ethical competition. But I don't know. Let's just be good people. So for our main topic tonight, we have a few of them, but they all kind of tie together, and they all revolve around open discussions on what FIRST could do to make and improve team experiences, which is something that I think we're all really passionate about. We have a lot of ideas on this, and our guests have come up with 3 topics for us to talk about. So Marshall, let's start talking about the Cost Accounting Worksheet. First of all, can you explain a little bit, give us like the TLDR for the teams of what the CAW is, and how do robots only add up to $4,000 each year? Because I know
isn't that interesting? Isn't that,
yeah,
they don't, none of these, they were all built in less than 6 weeks and for a total cost of less than $4,000, or at least that's the BS line that we tell everybody.
Well, before you first, I remember one time there was an engineering reporter at an event, and I was walking them through the event, and they were just like, and they're like, I was told that all these robots cost less than $3,500. That's a lie, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah. So
this is, again, we want to talk about ethics. This is one of them that drives me crazy, and I know why FIRST does it. At least I think I do. And I encourage them to tell me I'm wrong, to tell me that they don't do this so they can net more sponsors because it's a good soundbite, to say that these were all built by high school students in less than 6 weeks with less than $4,000. And it's a load of crap. I don't like that we tell people this. I've started, in fact, I've had to get, so for those who aren't aware, Team 900 is based at a public boarding school in North Carolina that takes a lot of 11th and 12th grade students. In particular, they apply during their sophomore year of high school. So most of our students are 2-year students. Beyond that, we also deal with these students that come in from other teams. So our team culture is unique in that we inherit what they pick up from their other teams, the prior teams that they were on. And a lot of them come in with this notion that robots are built in 6 weeks, and that after 6 weeks we stop building. And Team 900, we're very fortunate. We build 2 robots. We bagged one of them, and we keep working on the other. I've had to edit chairman's essays as well as other things to remove the 6-week line because it's just a load of crap and it drives me insane. And I don't want anybody to be under the impression that this was done in a shorter amount of time than it was for less money than it was. It's an expensive operation. Our annual budget's, 80, 90 grand now, and that includes travel and everything else for students along with housing and all of it. But the robots themselves don't cost $4,000. I mean, last year's robot, if I added up all the parts on our robots, we probably spent closer to $17,000, $18,000 between the 2 of them. And granted, our robots are technical, entertaining pieces, more for art than anything else, I think, sometimes. But, when we're putting 2 TX1s on a robot and 4 swerve modules from 221, and we're playing around with $300 cameras and everything else, it's absurd to say it costs less than that. But anyway, to give you the explanation of what the CAW is in a few sentences, it's the what used to be known as the bill of materials for the robot. It's all the parts that you have on the robot, except it's no longer called the bill of materials because we removed all the things that cost less than $5. And we removed all the things from the kit of parts. And we removed all the things from First Choice. There's the sample worksheet that teams are recommended they use. They're recommended to do it by subsystem, which I have no idea why, I guess to make the inspectors' lives easier. But inspectors, in my experience, they spend all of 30 seconds looking at this list if it's done in a way that looks professional. Or if it's not done in a way that looks professional, if it's done in Notepad because you built a robot in less than 7 hours with the help of 3 other teams at a championship event, then you are kind of given some funny looks. Though that was an interesting experience. My one anecdote from that is that the Talon SRX is included in the things that are $0 because we ended up with like 10 of them on that little tiny robot, I think, unintentionally, because we kept having problems with something we were doing with trying to get them to work in PWM mode. And I don't know. Anyway, the inspector who looked at it was giving me some crap and said, "Why didn't you document the cost for any of the Talons?" And I said, "They're a $0 part. It doesn't matter." Which, they're a $0 part. So it's a $90 motor controller that is worth approximately $0, which is absurd to me. I don't know. The call drives me crazy. Last year, some interesting things. I hope we can pull up a picture of it. One of the more interesting things that we looked at last year, because we ran into the upper $4,000 limit with our robot, and we're trying to figure out how we could scrape about $30 off of it, all told. What we learned was that certain types of 3D printer filament are actually a $0 item because they've been included in First Choice previously. In particular, this stuff known as tribofilament from IGUS, which there's a picture of. I don't know if we can pull it up or not. Yeah, there we go. This filament is like, I don't know, $70, $80 for a half a kilogram roll. It's $0 on the robot, though. Meanwhile, ABS, PLA, I don't know, $20 for a 2 kilogram roll or something like that, whatever the cost is. It's way, way cheaper. So that stuff adds up. And it makes absolutely no sense to me. So unless you can print it off in small enough quantities, which there's a whole thing with that too. So I know for us, one of the things we did last year with bumper fabric, because we ran into not just bumper fabric, we actually had fabric around our container for holding the fuel this past year. We went and found ripstop nylon, which is what it was, at less than $5 a yard, and cut it down to where we had multiple yards on the robot, but per yard it was less than $5. Guess what the cost was accounted for on the Cost Accounting Worksheet? $0. So silly stuff, man. I don't understand.
There's a lot of silly stuff there, Marshall. So, like, what would be your solution?
So, in an ideal world, because I think what we really want to do is we want to keep things kind of fair. The whole point of this is that, in theory, nobody spends more than what any other team can spend on their robot, right? Like, that's the theory. Except that doesn't work. And we know that doesn't work because there are teams that clearly have robots that cost substantially more. So if it were me, what I would probably do is enforce a substantially higher bill of materials price and force teams to document everything. There's a problem with that, though. Most teams don't want to document everything on their robot, and in fact, what ends up happening is a lot of teams that are unprepared because they've got a single teacher that's dealing with the rigors of public school, and on top of it trying to manage an FRC team and has never done it before, or has maybe done it for a couple of years but doesn't really know the rules that well. They end up at competition and they don't have anything. So, in my ideal world, I'd force everybody to adhere to like a $15,000 limit and make them document everything, mainly because I think that's an exercise in engineering, and that's the reality of it. We have to do these kinds of things when we're dealing with actual products and business. I don't know that that's the appropriate response, but nobody's paying me to run FRC, thank God.
Yet. Hey, Justin, what do you think about all of this?
So, I mean, for us, it seems like a gigantic waste of time to go through and document everything. And there are hundreds of ways to cheat this sheet, including calculating the actual square inches on a gearbox after it's been milled to account for the amount of aluminum that's actually being used. Or, you know, instead of
weight too.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's a way that you can reduce the cost of everything on this down to the point where it's not even a real thing. So one fix that I thought of that maybe is a better way to look at this so that we avoid you know, teams buying complete drive systems or buying things that are already fully assembled is to just put a hard limit at a max price for a single assemble item. That way, you can build whatever you need, you can do whatever you want. You just can't go out and purchase a complete, like, put together drivetrain or a put together arm, because you know if the cost is there that's allowed, then vendors will start selling that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, so somebody in the chat said you can't lawyer the rules if you're the one writing them, which I think that is kind of where my take on this comes from, is because I know exactly what I'm going to do as a team and a mentor of a team that's going to try and take advantage of this. And whatever FIRST does, and I have no idea, I don't know what the rules are going to be this year, but whatever they do, if it continues to be the same thing, yeah, we're going to take advantage of it. In fact, for me at least, I drew the line this past year with one of our students. I told him specifically, he was going through and doing all of this research for us, I would not let him pull up kit of parts things older than the team to use on it, even though that hurt us. We could have had very easily the cost we were going for if I had let him do what he wanted to do. And I put my foot down on it because I felt it wasn't right. I guess I had to put a line somewhere, and that was the line for me. So, but granted, that opens up, you know, every team is available. You know, you can go back in time and look at kit of parts things that have been included in every one of the kits, and that includes plate aluminum and Delrin and HDPE and tons of other materials in sizes that are crazy that, you know, you can mill materials out of. So every one of those gearboxes that you're milling out of 1/8-inch plate, guess what? You don't really need to account for it. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here. The individual part cost limit, whatever I'm trying to say, which is currently $400, has been $400 for so long that if you actually go and look it up, and I don't remember what year it started. At one point I went in and looked into this because I got fed up with it. We're really talking about a $550 to $600 cost for an actual, what was a $400 part if you account for inflation, and it depends on which metric you use for inflation. But there are tons of sensors that are being denied teams don't get to use them because they're just outside of that limit. So, and I say this, I have worked my tail off to get both Stereo Labs on board with the Z camera, and last year it was the RP LiDAR that I worked with, the company out of, I can't remember the name of the company that makes a RoboPeak, I think. But they make this scanning LiDAR system that was above the part cost limit for $400. I got them to agree to sell it to FRC teams for less, provided you sent them an email and said, hey, we're an FRC team and we need the cost for it. That involved me and my bank and trying to do a transfer to China. Let me tell you about the pain that I went through. So I guarantee you I'm on some government watch list somewhere now because of this. So
Is that really the only reason?
No,
Well,
but
that's the second time
you know.
Marshall's made me facepalm during the show.
I feel like it's just going to be one of those days.
Yeah.
It is.
Libby,
No, and I mean,
what are your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, I think we can go back and forth on this, but I wanted to bring up a point, Marshall, that you brought up at the very, very beginning of your rant, which is that sorry,
It's true.
I'm not wrong. Inspectors, when the bill of materials, which I'm sorry, I'm always going to call it bill of materials. It's a cost accounting worksheet, whatever we call it now. The piece of paper that we hand the inspectors, they look at it for 30 seconds. If it's done within the format and like a team that is, you know, prepared and ready and see there's a spreadsheet they've got to fill out and they create the right document, the inspector goes, oh yeah, that's less than 4, cool, and hands it back. And that's it. And it seems if this is really going to be something where we're holding teams to a standard of, you know, you have to make sure we're carefully documenting this, then maybe like if we're really going to talk about all these different like ways that we can lawyer what goes into the cost accounting worksheet, it's not even really being read. And in the cases where it's done to format, when it's on like a piece of paper and a kid is just writing, random things in pencil, then obviously it gets looked at. But I do appreciate the idea of it being less of a, hard and fast rule inspection process thing, but more of a process of documentation and a process of engineering for teams. Now, I can also speak for a team that has the ability to spend, I never thought I'd say this in my life, has the ability to spend money on robot parts. It was not something we could do for a long time, but we've got a lot of kids with a lot of drive to fundraise, and that's great. We're kind of in the same boat where maybe we can lawyer the way that this is from the kid parts and that was from First Choice, and we make it under $4,000, but realistically these robots don't cost $4,000. So I completely agree with the idea that the marketing line of every robot costs less than this is totally unnecessary. But also that, that like this 4,000 might be a way that you've lawyered the rules into fitting that your robot costs this much, but the development cost of that robot is so different and so wide between different teams that I also think it's not a perfect solution, but the idea of documenting your whole robot process and having that come in all under a much higher number. If the intent of the cost accounting worksheet, bill of materials, yada yada, is to make things even and level and fair for other teams, then make it a cap on the overall development, because a team could go spend $20,000 developing this perfect robot and then mill out and lawyer the rules exactly to a $39.99 robot. That doesn't account for all the money teams are spending on their system as a whole. So that's the point I'm kind of wonky about, is what if we're looking at what physically goes in the bag. That's a totally different thing than looking at the cost of development for that machine.
So the one thing I'll add to that is that Formula One uses a similar, they actually do things around engine development specifically. It's a silly system. I'm not sure it works for Formula One, to be honest, but I will say that such a system does exist, and it exists in an engineering sport that is remarkably similar to FRC in many ways.
So one thing I wanted to bring up is, I don't know how many of you have heard of the 24 Hours of Lemons, the car racing, but essentially if your car is a certain value, the judges can buy your car from you at the end of the event. Now imagine at the end of a first season, that anyone can go up and bid and say, I'm going to buy your robot for $4,000. Does anyone think that any team would say yes to that?
I think there would be some. I think there are some FRC teams who need money so badly who would actually do that. I know of a story of a Vex team that sold like a very, 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 very good Vex robot for well below what it was actually worth. But I see your point.
And
Can I clarify something really? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just one other challenge I wanted to put out there. You want to see if your inspectors are actually reading your CAW? Put like ingredients for chocolate chip cookies on there next year and see if they notice.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the same thing. It's not going to get looked at. One of the things we've put on before is mood ring, because we need to know how the robot's feeling. But I just wanted to clarify something in chat. I'm not talking about putting the amount of hours and counting hours for labor on a cost accounting worksheet. I was more in line with the agreement that Marshall's idea was not a perfect idea, but capping the total cost of what you're putting into one robot, not just capping the cost of what you throw in the bag. So I promise, chat, I am not trying to go nuts about like we have to track every single hour and every single thing that goes into the overall development. But I mean, realistically, 1 year, and I think Karthik, we were talking about this 1 year, 1923 bought like 700 feet of VersaFrame at once and like just went to town with it. Because that's what we did.
You were building a Versa house, apparently.
We needed a new shop. We were not in an ideal shop at the time, so we decided to build one out of VersaFrame. But to say that, and through that, like I guess my point is, through that we were able to do a lot more quick prototyping, and then still only put less than $4,000 of stuff inside on the cost accounting worksheet. Not that it was inside the bag, but hey, what our robot was made up of was less than $4,000 by the rules of what goes on this sheet. But we were able to spend a ton more money to throw at like ideas that we didn't think were going to work, or iterating on those things because we had more money. And if the point of accounting for what stuff you put on your robot is to make things even and fair, we should talk about what goes into the overall, like that. Marshall, your thought isn't totally, wrong. I know you said it wasn't perfect, but I think it's interesting to see like what are teams actually spending to create the final product, and then displaying on the cost accounting worksheet are two very different things. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
No, I agree completely. To me, this is something that, again, I go back to my notion that FRC is growing and changing. So this is no longer a competition with 600 teams. We're 3,000 plus teams, almost 4,000 teams globally now, and we're starting to get into it even more. I think we're going through this growing pain of how do you make it fair? And I don't have a good answer for that. I know that what we're doing right now, it sure as hell ain't fair. But that's what I'm going to say.
So I think so you guys have touched on a lot of things here, and one of them was the myth of 6 weeks and the myth of $3,500. But I guess where that myth concerns me is when we're convincing new teams to join the program, and this happens all the time. They're sold a lie. Like, oh, you only need to work on your robot for 6 weeks, and robots maximum cost like $3,500, but you could spend a lot less on them. And then here's what happens. And so everyone wonders why we have these threads on Sheep every year about people complaining about mentor-built robots and accusing teams of cheating. It's because teams are sold a lie when not all teams, but because some people give them honest information, but a lot of teams are sold a lie when they sign up for FRC. And so when they get to their first event and, they're told like, oh yeah, it's, like the most common lie that I hear is like, yeah, just a group of students working in a classroom can do this. You don't need a shop. And so then they see these massively beautiful powder-coated robots. Their first instinct is, oh, we were sold a lie. Their first instinct is, oh, that team's cheating. That team's a bunch of cheaters. Oh, mentors built that robot. That's clearly not students who did it. And so a lot of the animosity we see in our community is from these lies that are being sold, and that I just want them to go away. I always tell this story, but I'll never forget last year. When I was working at Vex, there was a team who called and said, because they bought a Vex Pro product, they're like, "You never told us we would have to cut things." I'm like, excuse me? It's like, we have to cut something. We can't do that. We don't have the tools for that. We were told that in FRC we would never need to use a tool. And I'm like, well, first of all, you've got to talk to someone else about this. Like that, I can't help you with that. But like, I literally had to like document like the easiest possible way to cut a sim shaft. It was just crazy. But like, it frustrates me when teams are sold that lie. Now, actually, back to the CAW. I don't really like the CAW. I don't know that there's much of a point of it. But the one thing I would like about it is if it was for data collection. I'm a numbers guy. I love having as much data as possible. It would be great. And at one point, the CAW had to be submitted by USB keys, and FIRST was downloading them, but then there were too many viruses spread, whatever. But like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why they stopped. That's why they stopped it. It was like 2 or 3 years ago, Marshall.
Really?
So like within your time span, but you had to submit an electronic copy, and it created all sorts of problems. But it would be cool if the CAW was, how like Frank released that blog with a report of like all what motor controllers people were using, what software they were using. It was just like this big data dump. It'd be cool if we had a big data dump for what motors people are using, what gearboxes they're using. Well, Alan Gregory started a really cool thread on Chief the other day about like unique parts. It'd be cool if we could look that up if that was all open source. So that would be a cool use of the CAW. And so like, I don't know, that would be a good thing about it. But I think the real reason I don't like the CAW is it creates a lot of gotcha moments. And I agree with what Libby said about how a lot of inspectors don't even look at it. But I find that there are some inspectors who will not look at the CAW for some teams, but will look at it for other teams. And I find there are some inspectors who will go out of their way to try and find something wrong with the team's CAW because they're 30-minute inspection, or in case you had a certain inspector that everyone loves who gave you a 3-hour inspection, if it didn't go so well and that inspector is feeling a little bit angry at your team, they will take it out on you with the CAW and say, oh, this line's wrong, I need this fixed. And it's like, well, and I've heard of inspectors saying that a team has to go get it reprinted out. They would not accept a correction with pen. Like, bizarre. I just dislike gotcha moments in general. I feel that we do it with teams like stepping over the barrier. There are referees who won't warn a team before stepping over the barrier. They wait for them to step over the barrier and then give them the yellow card. If we actually cared about safety, you would stop them from stepping over the barrier. So I think the CAW introduces an opportunity for gotchas, and so that's something else I'd like to do without. In terms of what teams spend on their robot, I think that the Chief Delphi community, I think even in the group of this conversation we're having right here, we do lose sight of the fact that there is a lower tier of teams who actually are spending only a few $100s on their robot. I speak, working in the Vex Canada office, I talk to teams all the time. They said, our budget's $1,000. We can only spend $1,000 on parts. And so that is a thing that exists out there. So I do get why FIRST has these sorts of limits, but I don't know. This is a weird one. On the other hand, no matter what limits you put in, teams are going to be able to blow right through them with R&D. That, like people have mentioned, in 2013, the cost of our robot wasn't that expensive, but all the iterations of hangers that we tried was crazy. Mini bots in 2011, I mean, geez, thousands of dollars. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a big topic in there. So, Libby, you want to take us away on our next topic?
Yes, I think we can do that, and I think some of it will come back around. We've talked about a couple of things that are going to cross over. So something that's been circulating around FRC for a couple of years, including some potential hints of its demise from FRC Director Frank Merrick and a strongly worded manuscript from Jim Zondag, has been Bag and Tag Day, Robot Stop Build Day, whatever we're going to call it this year. And included within that is the withholding allowance. So, Justin, you have some great stories of why you think the withholding allowance should go away, so you're going to go first. And Marshall, I think most of us here can talk just enough about the Harpoon rebuild from the 2015 championship, and we know that you have some other stories as well. So, Justin, we are going to start with you on what direction you think FIRST should be taking these into the future and why.
Yeah, so eliminate both of them right now. If a team like 558 can do a complete robot rebuild, and I mean complete, like chassis, wiring, superstructure, game piece manipulator, everything between 2 district events, then what is the point of having the bag at all? It's really just getting in the way of everyone doing what is good engineering, which is iterative design and moving forward. And we started it kind of as a joke, and now 558 just has this culture of, well, why don't we just put a chassis in the bag and then decide what we want to build later? It's we can decide based on our split, because we play an early district and a late district. We allow ourselves that time in between to completely reevaluate everything we've done. And we're not a big budget team, nor are we a large student team. And we just see what we like from other teams. The kids sit down and discuss it, and then we make a decision, and then they just lock in and go for it. And it's been a lot of fun and a lot of sleepless nights. But if you can schedule your time and work your way around, especially in districts with the unbag time, like you get 6 hours during an unbag, that anything you build during those 6 hours can go right in the bag and not count against withholding. So you can build an infinite amount of stuff during those 6 hours, and then outside of those 6 hours, still bring an additional 30 pounds, which with these new lighter weight robots that we're kind of heading towards, smaller robots, lighter robots, you're talking a third or more of your robot that you can just carry into an event whenever you want. I just, in my own history, just in FIRST, when I was on 2168 back in 2013, we took the whole top of the robot off and brought in a new one and rewired and rebuilt the entire machine. And then in 2014 on 558, the team changed the catapult from spring powered to pneumatic powered in the single unbag and unvent. And then 2 years in a row, we did 100% ground up rebuilds. And it's not something I want to keep doing, but there's nothing stopping us from doing this. And it's, our second robot has been an improvement and a performance boost, and the team has gone to the finals in their division the last 2 years at Worlds. So I can't argue with the results, and the kids can't either. And the kids don't see why other people aren't doing the same thing. Like, we don't think we're crazy. We just think maybe we're ahead of the curve, or we're not afraid to push it. But as far as we're concerned, the bag is popped, and we're going to continue to operate like this if the bag stays in place.
Yeah, I have to say, North Carolina moved to districts just a couple years ago, and I definitely saw it this past year with the sheer number of teams in North Carolina that had shooters week 1, and by week 2, they were all gone. So I don't think that it's just you guys. I think it's any team that's in a district. You're starting to see this more and more as parts just become more accessible. The VersaFrame system, and it's not just VersaFrame, it's the Rev extrusion and even the peanut stuff from Andy Mark or Walnut or whatever it is now, the various nut extrusions. All of these things are so lightweight in comparison to other products, and they're so easy to work with. They're not designed, you don't have to have a precision machine shop around to take advantage of them. You can do it with a drill and some center punches in your pit at a competition and take advantage of this fact. And even into the district events, we are technically allowed that 6 hours of unbag time because we don't get the extra practice day that the regionals get. But it doesn't matter. We still have that time before the event officially starts where we've done load in and we're in the pit and we're sitting there. A lot of teams sit around with nothing to do. I mean, they don't even make it for load in on time necessarily. So I feel like, the bag is gone, even though we don't want to admit to it. I don't know. It's funny. I'll go back to that presentation that Andrew and I did recently. The two of us came to the conclusion that, at least for the moment, pessimism has taken over, and we don't think the bag is going to go away anytime soon, unfortunately. But I don't know. I would love to see it go away. I think for all intents and purposes, it's gone as it is, and the only people that it's really hurting are the really low resource teams that don't understand or aren't paying attention to how the rest of us are operating and doing this and taking advantage of the fact that we get that time, or we've got that withholding allowance. So there's a lot of low resource teams that just don't read the rules. They don't have mentors that are pushing the students to do that, or they don't have students that are pushing to make it happen. So I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. I think it's gone. I don't know. I guess we kind of need a devil's advocate here to speak up and maybe speak for the teams that want to keep a 6-week build season, which I don't know. For me, it doesn't exist, but anybody have an opinion maybe?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually searching a post that I put on Chief because someone asked for what would be arguments to keep bag and tag. But I guess boom, found it. Maybe. No, maybe not. I'll keep looking as. Oh wait, got it. But so I guess my first point is I guess I'll be the defender of the bag here, even though I don't necessarily. I just don't know how I feel on this one, but I do have. So when FIRST put out that survey, even though the survey was poorly worded, there was definitely a lot of people who want the bag to stay, and I guess there's this one. For everyone here and everyone, who's handing out buttons at events about, pop the bag and the bag or whatever, all of you guys and girls are going to be back next year if bag and tag's still a thing. No one's quitting FIRST because of that. But FIRST has definitely heard, I've heard from our RD who said that numerous teams have told them if they get rid of bag and tag and they get rid of the 6 weeks, their teams are out. So when FIRST headquarters hears that, well, if we make a change, teams will quit. But if we don't make a change, nothing, things are going to be fine. We're going to hold our 90% retention rate or whatever. I can see why they say, well, maybe we shouldn't make a change. So looking at, just last year from conversations with teams, it's more about districts and whatever, but like, I guess what scares teams about right now, when the 6 weeks ends, a lot of teams just stop, and their teachers say 6 weeks is over, we're done, and the kids will be like, oh, I just want to keep working and blah blah blah, and the teacher's like, no way, I need to take some time off, and this is done. If we get rid of it and we go to the 16-week build season, now the teacher can't, if they say we're stopping, it's not because the rules say that we have to stop. It's because the teacher's saying we have to stop. So now that's on them, and they feel like they're letting their team down. Mentor burnout's a real thing in this program. Mentors go through this program, especially on these teams where it's just like the one teacher who's running everything. And so sometimes, and I get that the bag seems like an artificial restraint. At the same time, right now, there's a lot of teams, more teams than people realize, who only work for 6 weeks. And so say we get rid of the bag. Half of those teams may start to work, but the other half are just going to stay working. They're like, nope, I don't care if it's changed. We're just going to stay. We're doing 6 weeks. And everyone's going to say, that's fine. That's them. They're going to be really bad in comparison. Those teams already don't do well in competition. So like, if you look at the stratification of FRC, by getting rid of the bag, the upper middle tier benefits the most, because they're the tier that builds practice robots right now who won't have to build practice robots anymore. And so they take a huge benefit. The elite teams are unaffected. They're just going to be, guess what, guys? 254 is going to be good no matter what. I hate to tell it to you. The lower mid teams, or if you take that bottom half, I think half will do a lot better because they'll have more drive time with their robots. They have more time. But the quarter that's just going to stay, their performance is going to drop significantly because everyone else is getting better. And some might say that's on them. Hey, that's the game. But I think to the people at headquarters, it's like, well, no, right now we have something that's propping these teams up a little bit some way. So I don't know. Like, that's my half-hearted devil's advocate argument here. I know it's not the most put together in all of this, but in terms of, forget about bag and tag right now and just talk about the withholding allowance. The withholding allowance just kills me. I mean, of the reasons why I backed away from full-time mentoring, and the withholding allowance was one of them, because I was just so exhausted after 2015. Like, that season it's no longer enough to show up to week 1 with an elite level robot, because if you don't keep evolving, your robot's no longer elite. You have to continue. And it's almost like at 11-14, we started talking about this. It's like we would make our design priority list and we'd say, these are the things we have to do to compete regionally. And then here's something we have to do for Worlds. In 2014, when we showed up at Worlds with that goalie stick, we knew we weren't going to get it done for regionals. We knew we didn't really need it for regionals, except that 254 was coming to one of our events. But we knew we needed it to have a shot at winning Worlds. And so like the development just never stopped, both software and hardware. And I mean, our driver in we've had kids who've been on the drive team who just said, I can't do this anymore. This is too much because of the withholding allowance. Like, they're constantly building, and then they have to practice, and then they have to build, and then they have to practice. And it's like, I really, forget about what they do with the bag. I think the withholding allowance needs to be drastically slashed.
I agree. I actually, I don't know. Part of me, if we're going to keep the stupid bag, then get rid of withholding allowance, which I hate to say that. I think, Justin, it would hurt your team because your culture has changed.
No, but Justin's team's got such a great culture of people who work hard and people who are good at robots. True. They're going to be good,
That's true.
They will find other.
We'll just do it during the unbag.
There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
or you'll go back to remember those crazy 12-hour practice days that teams would have, where it's like we have to get this much done. Good teams 558 and 33 and 254, they're going to be good, but it just at what cost? And I guess the one thing is that I hear more and more from kids who do FRC, and a lot of them say, yeah, I'm like, what other extracurriculars? They say, can you write me a letter of reference? I'm sure. What other extracurriculars did you do? It's like, I didn't do any other because I just did FRC. That hurts me because there's so much more to high school than FRC. And if this program has gotten to the point where you want to be an elite student on an elite team, you cannot do a varsity sport and you can't do anything else. It's like, Oh, like I know I talk about the jack of all trades, the master of none, but at what point is this program just becoming too hard? And I understand the hardest fun you can ever have, blah blah blah, you know. But at some point, like, if are we making kids pigeonhole? Like, there's a huge discussion about elite level athletes in North America, and it's crazy how early we make them specialize. Like, if you want to be an elite swimmer, you have to have chosen the path to be an elite swimmer by the age of 8 or 9. Libby did figure skating as a kid, so she knows what that's like. If you want to be an elite level figure skater, age 6, you have to have decided that that's what you want to do. Like,
pretty much, yeah, like 8 maybe if you're lucky, like if you're just naturally talented.
But now we're saying, like, in FRC, like, if you want to be an elite like FRC kid, like, you have to come into high school and just say you're not doing anything else, and like that's crazy in my mind. I know there's plenty of kids who are able to multitask and do that sort of thing, but I don't know. I feel like we're putting a lot of pressure on these kids.
It does put a lot of pressure on them, but I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I will say, you know, for me, my following outside of FRC is Formula One, and drivers start early. I mean, they're doing karting at the age of 7 or 8, and they're brought up. I mean, we've got currently the youngest F1 driver that we'll ever have because we now have an age limit. But I don't know. You kind of have to start early and do that. I do feel like, you know, we don't limit our students to, you know, we don't tell them you have to participate in FRC and you can't do varsity sports, but we do tell them there's a time requirement that we require of you. This does require commitment on your part, and you have to meet those standards. I don't know. Maybe that does kind of force them from doing other extracurriculars, but at the same time, I don't know that that's bad, is my take on it.
Yeah, and like, it's not a universal opinion. I do want to hear from Justin. So Justin, if, like, let's say we do pop the bag, and what do you think FIRST would need to do to ensure this, to help ensure the sustainability of those teams where the coaches are like, if we pop the bag, I'm out. Like, because I agree with the notion that, you know, I think FRC could benefit in a lot of ways from getting rid of the bag, but I do think that a lot of these teachers who, you know, the ones who need to be saved from themselves so they, you know, aren't overworked and burnt out, how can we address topics like student burnout and mentor burnout in a post-bag world?
Sure. So I think that there's a couple solutions to this. You know, the way I look at it is, and the teams here in New England are starting to do it more and more often, is just that if we're at a level with our robot that we feel comfortable and we have access to practice with our robot, we can go to the practice field that, you know, Team 195 has a practice field that they open up to all of us. And if we're there with the students who are driving, the rest of the team can help other teams. So, you know, the elite teams are going to continue to help others. Like, that's just a matter of fact. And if there's no way we can get to those single team robots, like if that robot is trapped in that bag, there's no way for us to help them get any better. There's no way for us to help them fix their machine or get them the drive practice they need. I think that the MCC concept has to spread. If the best bet for all of this is get maybe Vex, and, you know, I don't like the robot in 3 days concept. I think that that's just a large number of people trying to relive their high school years and throwing stuff at a wall and trying to get it to stick. And it really is frustrating for me that the RI3D doesn't just sit down and do. I would rather honestly see robot concept in 3 days. Like, give me real analysis. Give me a breakdown of what the game is. Give me what the heck a team should build. Like, what do I bolt on the kitbot so that I can play in eliminations? That's what I want to see.
So it was interesting to me. There was a recent thread on CD about the RI3D thing, and I asked that question because I said, what on earth are you people doing with this? Because I truly don't understand it. I feel like it jumped the shark this past year where it just went off the rails. I don't know what robot, like, they were just building random crap. It wasn't even legal. Like, there were things that were done. I'm like, that's not going to pass inspection. I mean, anyway, the comment in the thread was basically, we don't build these robots to pass inspection. We don't build them to be anything other than showcases for sponsors. And I was baffled by that. I'm like, so the whole point of this is so you can make it accessible to teams, but yet you're building a robot that you really don't have much intent of being accessible to teams. It made no sense to me.
Well, I remember the first RI3D. We've just totally gone off topic, but that's cool. The first RI3D, like that was, they built that simple human loading frisbee robot that was just, it was just very, very basic, and that was like the cool concept. But then like, and I'll fully admit, I think Vex Pro was responsible for a lot of it. Like when Paul Copioli and John B. Noon start building robots in 3 days, they were building like Einstein quality robots in 3 days, which was kind of throwing teams off. And so, I mean, the next year with Build Blitz, you know, like we pushed and we didn't try and build a robot in 3 days, and we tried to do like here's strategic analysis and like this is like a breakdown of the game, that sort of stuff. But I would love to see, and there's been some RI3Ds that do it, like Team Orion's done that before, I think, but build an actual MCC in 3 days, and I think that would like pushing the MCC concept. But I think, Justin, you hit on the really good point. I think the more that we can try and show teams that, hey, you don't need to try and build a 254 style robot to win, that you can use a kit bot and build something very simple, like all the simple passive gear pouch robots last year that did well. Hoist those teams up as examples, and I think like the elite level teams need to talk about, like on 11-14, like a simple robot that's just a kit bot and something is gonna shoot to the top of our pick list when it comes to like, you know, what we're doing in the second round, and really so teams can kind of see that might help these teams and might convince them to stick around and say, hey, FRC isn't as hard. And I think the other thing that's been really good is that I think a lot of high level teams have been explaining their new calendars that they've been going to, and there's still some teams who do the we're going to work 12 hours a day every day sort of deal. But there's a lot of teams now that's like, yeah, we take 3 days off during the week. And I think more teams need to hear about that, about teams using their time effectively. Like 2056 does not work Sundays, just not a thing they do. You know, and they don't usually work super late. They just work very efficient. Tyler Holtzman also isn't human. Like there's that factor to it too. But like, I think it's important for teams. I don't know. If maybe we just got to show more examples and more of this project management type stuff.
Yes, so that was actually what I was going to touch on when we were talking about mentor and student burnout. Is that's something we've kind of been looking into as far as studying what other teams do and taking time off of their schedule. Is it makes, you know, we're a weird team in that we're so big that even if there were no bag, we'd still build twin robots because we just want people to be able to build robots. But there's this whole idea of, you know, the common argument and the devil's advocate for keeping the bag is that, oh, well, if you give a team that only had 6 weeks, if you give them 3 months, then they're just going to work themselves to death for 3 months. But your point about putting that resource out there, that you don't have to work yourself to death for 3 months, you can still create these robots. And I think there's a mix, right? There was also a question in chat that I copied and wanted to keep down, was that would unlimited time force teams that want to be competitive to rebuild their robot every week, causing burnout? And Justin is the example that without unlimited time, with the bag in play, teams do that. And so I think we went so off topic, I feel like I lost a couple of my things, but I think there's, when it comes to bag and tag, it's the biggest point that you guys haven't already hit on that I really want to say as loudly as possible is we need to stop marketing first. It's the same thing as a cost accounting worksheet. We need to stop marketing first as a 6-week build season because teams are sold a lie. And I feel like maybe that's just a point that we've hit on kind of every little bit, but at a root, this isn't a 6-week thing for teams. To be a team that has whatever your definition of success is, has some of that. You can't just start on January 6th and end on February 20th. You have to do stuff outside of that. And so I think that's what's important, is we have to stop pretending about 6 weeks, whether there is a bag or not, because teams are going to find a way in or out of the bag, whether FIRST makes a decision on that or not.
Well, I think one thing that's crazy is like a lot of people say, oh, well, 6 weeks sounds more impressive to sponsors and to like the media and whatever. It's like, I hate to tell this to you guys, but like the media and sponsors and like especially politicians, they're still going to be impressed if you say we worked on this robot for 16 weeks. They're not going to be like, oh, you took 16 weeks to work on that robot? Psh, not giving you any money. Out of here. Like,
so
yeah, exactly.
It goes beyond the robot though, right? Like the fact that we sell teams on this notion that it's 6 weeks, what's the high? So seriously, I mean, this is a dumb question to ask, and we all know the answer. But what's the highest award we give teams at a competition?
The Chairman's Award, which we
And
say,
is that done in 6 weeks? Because I'm going to tell you, there ain't no way in hell. Like it takes every ounce of time you have outside of that to make that.
It's not just that, Marshall. The amount of teams who I've seen, they've gotten feedback from judges. It's like, your program's great, but you need to move to being a 52-week program. And it's impossible to win a Chairman's Award if you're not a year-round team and you're not doing demo after demo and you're not, pouring maple syrup for or whatever. I don't even understand the Chairman's Award anymore.
I don't either. But well, that's all right. The one for me is EI. I can't tell you. I have no idea.
Another show, Marshall.
Different candidly speaking.
Focus. All right, guys. Does anyone have any last thoughts on, we've talked about a lot of things today, but just tying back to our general theme of what FRC can do to enhance the team experience. Anyone, let's go around the room here and just kind of say final thoughts, starting with Libby.
So mine mostly are not on topic, centered around kindness towards people at events and treating people like they're humans. But I will put that also under the umbrella of laying out resources to avoid burnout, whether it's discussion on schedules or discussion on more well-rounded students. Because when you are talking about kids who only do FRC and that's it, that is one of the most, I'll happily talk to people and chat about it later. But that's a thing in my school district. We have this thing called the whole child movement, where we're talking about not only developing a kid in a technical skill or math or science or reading, but that whole person. And if as mentors we're not there to build the whole person, that gets a little bit strange. So we really do need to think about whatever decision FIRST makes on scheduling, that we're doing the right thing by both ourselves as mentors to not burn out, but by our kids as well. So that's my last bit.
Justin.
Get rid of the bag, please. I mean, that's about as simple as I can boil it down to. I think that bring on more COTS products like Vex Pro and AndyMark and West Coast products and the other guys doing all the things to help the teams with low resources. Keep up the good work, keep making good products that make it easy for us to build simple robots that can play this game. And AndyMark and Vex, please just help teams out with this MMCC stuff. Get us something so that we can get more teams on the ground that can play the game.
Marshall.
So mine's going to be sustainability. I think that we need, as an organization, to refocus some thoughts and energies towards how we make ourselves sustainable, how we get teams over that second year and into their third, and how we increase the average lifespan of teams from 5.5 years, I think, which is what it is right now, to well beyond that. FIRST keeps growing. I want to see us grow sustainably.
I guess on mine, just going back to our first discussion, I really want to just make it clear. But Vex, AndyMark, Rev, West Coast Products, all these companies, they've changed FRC forever in a good way. If you think about the pre-COTS era, what robots looked like and how hard it was for teams to succeed with low resources. And I think the 2017 season was just the best for teams with low resources, because you could do a simple kit bot, or you could do a VersaDrive or whatever, and you could just use your Versa planetaries for your hang and just boom, 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 and teams put together robots that just would have been impossible. So we had this discussion about supplier ethics, but I just the suppliers we have in FRC, they're so dedicated to this community. So I just want to thank them for doing all that. And in terms of all the bag stuff and everything, I just think that I just want everyone who's from a team who succeeds regularly. I mean, that means a team who makes the elimination rounds pretty much at every event you go to, where you just kind of know you're going to make the elims. Be mindful of the teams with lower resources, the teams that are struggling, when you frame your arguments about bag and withholding or whatever, and don't just think about how this is going to affect your team, but think about how it's going to affect them, and that'll allow us to make positive changes that benefit the whole community. I think it's important in life that we check our privilege, but I think it's also important in FRC that we check our privilege. And I think a lot of people who are on teams who are well funded or even just decently funded don't recognize how hard it is to be on a team that's trying to build a robot on a budget of $1,000 and thinks that they're not supposed to cut parts. And that does exist, and it's, we have to be mindful and helpful there. So as we wind this show down, and before we get into any user questions, I want to start tonight's giveaway. Nik, can you show us the shirt that's been donated from Team 1676, the PASCAC Pioneers, once again? And I want to talk about this shirt because this shirt is more than a shirt. Team 1676 wants everyone to know that if you want to buy one of these shirts, and the link's going to be available somewhere, part of the proceeds are going to go to the Amazing campaign, which is supports the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. This is a cause that I hugely believe in, and so everyone wants like World Championship swag. If you buy this shirt, it's actually going to make a difference for people. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does amazing work and literally saves lives. So I really want to thank 1676 for partnering with such a great organization, and just want to, that's my plug for the night. Don't forget, you got to follow the channel or subscribe if you want to win. If you subscribe, you get all sorts of like bonus internet something. I don't know. Sorry, Libby, I'm just brutalizing your Twitch world here. But subscribe, it's good, and you can win an awesome shirt. The keyword you need to type into the chat right now is amazing. One word, amazing. If you can't spell it, you don't deserve to win. So good luck, everyone. As everyone spams the chat, well, I'm rewarding literate people. I'm sorry. Let's talk about some of the questions that we got.
Are you plugging dictionaries? Because I thought that was my job.
I saw that thread on Chief. I'm like, yeah, not doing it. Not doing it. Yeah. So should should team auditing of CAWs be a thing? Is a question from Evan S2410. Does anyone want to touch on that?
I mean, I'd like to be able to look at, Karthik, you mentioned it earlier, being able to like look through another team's CAW to find out where these parts come from. Because, think about, what is that material they're using on their gripper? What is on that intake? What are they using for shooting wheels? Like, being able to look that up without having to bother them would be an amazing thing.
Hey,
that brings up a point, because every year, when there's a game with a commonality to a past game, I get all sorts of emails. What did 1114 use here? What do we use if we share that freely? It's crazy how many teams come to me and say, wow, thanks for telling us. We talked to other teams who wouldn't tell us what part they used. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize we were at that point where people would refuse to say, hey, this is the McMaster part we used on our robot 5 years ago. So
I actually think if the Blue Alliance, if somebody from that is listening, this is a feature maybe you guys can integrate, link it to a GitHub file or something. Any team that wants 900 CAW, I am happy to give it to you. It's highly entertaining, if nothing else.
The next question we have, can you please ask Karthik how 1114 documents parts that are not really ... traditional? They once put a rake on their robot. I mean, it's true. We did once put a rake on our robot, a butter knife, a golf club, a fishing pole. All these things sort of happen. But I mean, I don't know. Rakes have prices. We just go to rakes.com, I guess, and look it up.
Yeah.
I mean, we did not account for the depreciation on the rake. And we did account for the full portion of the rake we put on, not just the prongs.
Was it less than $5? Because you didn't have to put anything.
Dude, we use only high quality rakes.
All high quality rakes.
Like people joke about the fishing poles we had on our Can Burglar in 2015, but those were like some expensive ass fishing poles. We have a bunch of hunters and fishers on our team. It's really weird. I don't understand, but like they went to like these weird hunting fishing stores where you buy camo and stuff. I don't even know where you find the camo because you can't see it, but yeah, so we accounted for the rakes properly.
That a lot of teams were using carbon fiber rods then, and the price for carbon fiber keeps dropping. So if you're a team and you really want to try carbon fiber stuff, it's out there and available. Just be careful machining it. So,
a question from First Updates Now regular Azatoth __. Do any of the 3 or 4 teams represented have a teacher as critical mentor? How does that teacher feel about Bag Day? On 1114, our teacher has definitely expressed thoughts that he would be less involved if the bag, less involved or not involved if the bag is gone. And a dear friend of mine is a teacher as well, and she has expressed the same thought that she would be out of the program if Bag Day is gone. Others?
So on 558, yeah, we have a teacher that's pretty heavily involved. But in terms of being in the room, she doesn't always have to be there. So she manages scheduling the room for us if we need to be there on other days. And she stops in pretty much every meeting, but we can get by with the rest of the mentors. We're lucky that we've started to really stack up on our mentors, so we have good shop coverage.
So we're in a similar but kind of flipped position. So for our team, we are a smaller mentor group, but 4 of the adults are school district staff, not necessarily teachers. So we're kind of on the flip of that, where somebody does have to be there all the time, and we get a little more burned out. But we do have a teacher who is starting to involve as a more critical mentor, and is kind of new to things. So I would say is pretty neutral, but I will report back once he's been through a season with us, like a full build season after school.
Just trying to fly through some of these questions here. With any of these topics, what are we hoping to get changed for 2018? Frank has already stated the bag will exist in 2018. Are we trying to change the minds of the powers that be? So I just want to back up here. Nothing's changing for 2018. First is, I'm assuming they're not going to do a massive whole-scale change in December. Their manual has got to be locked up by now. And I don't think it's the goal of this show to try and change the minds of anyone, or in terms of powers that be or whatnot. I think this is just, we're here to have discussions about these sorts of topics. I think if someone wants to get minds changed, you need to go to your local regional director. I think that's something that gets skipped a lot, where people just think, oh, I'm just going to post on Chief and then someone's going to read this. Talk to your regional director, because your regional director is hearing from the teams who are saying that they want to keep the bag. That voice is being heard. So you need to tell them about why you want to go, and then hopefully it will be passed up along the chain. A question on a scale of 1 to 2 champs spelled with a Z because this person's like illiterate. How much, Ho spelled H-O-E, do you hate 775 Pro drives? From Nik Cousins.
I love them. I think they're going to be amazing.
I think that teams who know what they're doing are going to do well with them, and I think teams who don't are going to do really poorly with them. I think it's going to be the Mecanum drive thing. I've always said about Mecanum drives, like if 254 builds a Mecanum drive, hey, it's going to be freaking awesome. Like holonomic drives, 1114 built one in 2015. It was all right, but like, I think the flip side is teams who don't know what they're doing with 775 Pro drives could end up driving into a wall on practice day, and bad things happening.
Let's face it, they were going to do that regardless of whether there was a 775 Pro.
Right, but what happens when you drive into the wall is a little bit different. It's just like Mecanum drives, which are a part of life in FRC. Some of the spread is going to, there's a big standard deviation with a drive like that compared to a kit bot, where it's you know what you're going to get, and it's consistent and whatever. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at it, but I don't think 558 is going to be doing it anytime soon. We're from New England, so if anything, we'll be 6 sim or 6 minis. Yeah, but just be careful if you're going to do this. Stand on the shoulders of the people who have done it already. Really research it and talk to them. And if you're going to go through with it, just be careful and maybe design the ability to switch back.
Yeah, and just going back to what we were saying about like trying to push MCC concepts and whatever, just a simpler drivetrain with less points of failure is just like, for teams who struggle to finish a robot and struggle to score points every year, just go simple. And there's one thing I would love for teams to learn: there's no shame in using the kitbot as is. The kitbot's great. Like Andy Baker works on the kitbot. He's really smart. Use the kitbot. Libby?
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much. For some reason, I've been last this whole time, but you guys have covered it. I think for my personal experience, I'm a little bit nervous to see with this kind of expansion on and more public visibility on gearbox options for 775 Pros. It's going to be too easy to reach for teams that don't know what they're doing. That doesn't mean I agree with taking them down on Chief, because that's not okay. But that's not how you teach people. I'm all about sass, but you don't teach people by relentlessly sassing them. You got to do some education in there. I think it's important for teams, like Justin said, to just research. And if you're not confident that you're not going to burn that out, and you're not confident that you're not going to bust your robot open at your first match, then let's be careful going into all of these different 775 Pro options coming out.
All right. And so thank you to everyone who's made this show possible. But hey, remember, that sweet t-shirt, we got to give it away. So let's cue it up and let's do the drawing here virtually. Something drum roll. And the winner is FRC Team 401. Congratulations on your t-shirt. Hopefully it fits the entire team.
I don't know how they're all going to fit in that one t-shirt, but congratulations to the user behind FRC Team 401. So that is it for tonight on Candidly Speaking. Thank you to everyone who is helping make the show possible. If you like what we do here on First Updates Now, all we ask is that you tell others about the show and invite them to watch next time so they can get more FRC in their life.
Justin, Marshall, thanks for being on. First of all, thanks for providing the topics for tonight and your insights. This was really fun. Glad to have had you. Is there anything the two of you would like to plug coming into the 2018 season? Justin.
Try and do simple better, guys. Just focus on building what you can build within your means, and let's have a fun season.
All right, Marshall.
I have no idea. Dictionaries, literacy.
All right,
Marshall
plugs dictionaries, literacy, and reading the rules. Things that I think we can all get behind.
I think we can all do that. Thank you, guests. You guys are awesome. You will always bring a smile to our faces. Before we sign off, we do also want to announce that Fun has opened up our channel for community events for free. If you've got a live conference, a competition, or any event really that you'd like to have aired on this channel, where lots of firsters can see it, please reach out to us on Facebook, or you can email admin@firstupdatesnow.com. Also, next Monday on Fun Recap, we will have our second annual FRC Top 25 popularity poll for charity on Recap. I just love popularity for charity. Voting will open up on Wednesday and close on Saturday, so please check Chief Delphi or Facebook for the link. We'll be accepting donations on stream on behalf of the First in Texas Disaster Relief Fund. More information on that in the Chief Delphi thread. We are going to have giveaways as well if we meet certain fundraising goals, so got to check out the stream on Monday for all of that good stuff.
On behalf of myself, Libby, our producer, Nik Olsen, who's been working tirelessly behind the scenes, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, watching, listening, chatting, subscribing, emoting, all those other things. Thanks to Justin and Marshall for being guests, and thanks to our moderators in chat, especially Caltran. We'll see you all next time on Fun, so we'll talk to you then.
Hey, guys.
Bye, guys.